again, coming back after like 2 weeks away, I'm playing a bit of catch up. One of the big things that came out in that time of the past week was an interview done by Insider Gaming and Tom Henderson with Charlie Olson, a software programmer who was with Raven Software on 2 separate occasions and who also wrote the matchmaking rating algorithm for Call of Duty's matchmaking systems. And well, it validated a lot of our feelings on the system, but also provided insight further into the way things work. Today, we're breaking down what you need to know. Drop your thoughts, drop a like, and subscribe for more Black Ops 6 and other FPS coverage. So in this interview, its entirety can be found in the description below. It's a lengthy one, so we're not going to be going into insane detail, reciting the entire thing for you. But for context and understanding about the situation and what it means for this discussion, Charlie Olson initially wrote the MMR algorithm for China's Call of Duty Online in 2015, with that algorithm then making its way into the first mainline entry of Call of Duty, like the main games here, not necessarily Warzone that would come later on, but the premium paid experiences in 2016's Infinite Warfare. It's been there ever since, as described, with matchmaking itself becoming more sophisticated over the years, but Olson's rating algorithm remained essentially unchanged from what he said. Olson also then moved on from Raven Software in 2020. So this guy doesn't work with anything COD anymore, so has no reason to lie, exaggerate, or anything like that. But the key points of the interview, starting right up front from both the minds of the business side and those involved with writing the algorithms for matchmaking, skill-based matchmaking isn't going away in Call of Duty and arguably any other live service game that wants to be successful. Olson said the white paper that we saw is accurate and he can attest to it personally based on his own analysis of Call of Duty and other games, saying that live service games need skill-based matchmaking and skill-based matchmaking needs MMR, what he directly worked on. He then continued to explain that both are needed to ensure long-term sustainability and player engagement, which are both crucial components in ensuring a successful live service game. Olson has said, though, that doesn't mean everyone should just shut up and like skill-based matchmaking. And as we'll discuss in a little bit, he's pretty much on the side of the players despite having worked on these types of things before. He further explained around half the players would be driven to stop playing without skill-based matchmaking because sometimes you stomped, sometimes you get stomped. That narrative only applies to around 40% of players by skill, with 10% of the very top players doing 90% of the pub stomping. People don't like being the weak link repeatedly, and high-skilled players don't like carrying a team of potatoes all the time. But to further understand where this sort of discussion will go, we have to lay out what skill-based matchmaking is, and with some of the insight he provided. Skill-based matchmaking, in particular with Call of Duty, consists of 3 different systems: matchmaking, team balancing, and MMR, or a matchmaking rating or skill rating. The last of which is what Olson literally wrote and is the number that matchmaking and team balancing utilizes. It takes into consideration the ratings of everyone in the match and updates your rating based on your relative performance. So Olson stated that in COD that MMR is more volatile in the mid-range, which is an issue that can be addressed. So for those outliers, the very worst and the very best, it's going to be a lot more consistently equal in the bottom-most regions of matchmaking, and as a lot of people will see with high-skilled players, more consistently sweaty in those higher outliers. But the middle, that's where you'll see things that are more volatile, having ups and down swings that maybe you might not see as much. You might feel your stuff is consistently sweaty, and that's because, well, we're not the casual audience. We're not the majority here, despite having perhaps some of the most passionate takes on the game. When you consider the millions of players that play Call of Duty every single month, you and I who are engaging in the discussion and the media searching it out more than just loading up the game, we're not the casual player base here at this. But this is where he adds, if you are trying to get better at the game, skill-based matchmaking just rewards you with tougher opponents. I'd even say that skill-based matchmaking punishes players for being good. That's unfair, and players are right to complain about it. Olson also talked generally about skill-based matchmaking, stating, contrary to some players' belief, you really don't have to try your hardest every match. If you go off meta, your MMR will adapt after a few bad games, and matches will get easier. The exception would be when you're playing low pop modes that attract high skill players or during open betas. COD skill-based matchmaking gets mistaken for EOMM or engagement optimization matchmaking, but it's really just because the MMR is highly responsive and volatile. As for the sort of necessity for this and why we won't see it going away, he said that it's something that's needed for the long-term sustainability of live service games, but a solution can be transparency. COD does not display any data sets or details of where your matchmaking is. We saw this recently, the entire discussion stemming from Ace's video a couple of weeks back, where you could request your data on matchmaking and everything about your sort of player subsets and check it out, but it has zero markers or indications of what a sort of benchmark would be, where you stack up. It's just data without any sort of given markers or any intel regarding it. But it's as hidden as it legally can be, which is the problem, and leads players to make their own inferences and answers that oftentimes aren't exactly the case. Olsen further stated that you should be able to see your matchmaking rating in your combat record. One thing that, whether you like the game or not, I thought was awesome and very refreshing to see from XDefiant when that was introduced. You could see your specific rating, and while again, there was no public marker or lobby leaderboard to compare against the players you were playing against, you could see that, and you could at least online compare, okay, this is what the general populace has, or I'm above said general populace in terms of my own personal rating. Older COD games would show you things like lobby stats, where you stacked up in terms of either your score per minute or your overall score for your career. That stuff is not shown to you now, but in things like XDefiant is out in the open. So how do you fix this? Besides transparency, he stated one solution is to reward players with more XP for being better at the game. Casuals don't need to be completely about skill like ranked, but you should be able to see something about the average skill of your lobby or your opponents. Like maybe this match is a gold tier, so you get 1.2 XP multiplier. No, I don't personally agree with that one, but that was his statement. But that really was everything about this interview that, again, provided some insight, provided some back-end knowledge on how things work here in the matchmaking system. And my initial reactions is that it's nice that we have people like this that have had a hand in development that feel the same as players, because oftentimes it does feel like it's players versus the world if you care about this situation, that like everybody here that has a hand in developing the game, no matter what they do, is out to get the player. It's nice to see somebody go on record here with this, because having talked to developers for years as a part of doing this whole YouTube thing, it is one of those things that if you talk to them one-on-one, they oftentimes agree with the player on a litany of issues. A lot of stuff you may bring up is something that they'll agree with, but they just don't have their hand in actually making those decisions. So these types of things, seeing the understanding of, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but here's why this works, I think it's good for the overall health of the discussion about these types of things. The unfortunate part about this one in particular is that it seems like it's not going to yield any effects, because he straight up said, hey, they care about this kind of stuff for the longevity of live service games. But I've personally said before that, like, if I at least understand the perspective of it, I'll be more receptive to it. I might not like it, but I personally appreciate the insight. Personally speaking on it, one big thing that I don't think that this necessarily helps is, though, the overall burnout that seems to be happening this year more than others. Honestly, it's one of those things that I feel like every single video that I put up, there's so many people being like, I'm done with Black Ops 6 for good. And I feel like it's more than other years, which is just something that happens every single year in a cycle. But I feel like this year in particular has perhaps more. I feel this every single year. I mean, it's why this is the only 15th or 16th upload of the month, a historically low number for my channel. I've taken 11 days off of uploads in February so far this year in attempts to keep with a goal that I set myself at the new year, to not stress it in the off season, to not force myself to upload a COD video for the sake of uploading a COD video when there's, number one, not much going on, and number two, I'm not playing as much. So it's been weird to reflect on that. I don't think I had 11 days with no videos in like the first 8 years of running this channel, but I feel like now we might be finally seeing the long-term effects of these matchmaking systems and how they are presented, how the players are treated with these, with this year in particular perhaps. Doing Call of Duty and content as a job, I feel like I've felt this annually for a long time now. It's the reason that I didn't really play Cold War's MP years ago, because it was that ramped up matchmaking we saw within Modern Warfare 2019, playing that legitimately for like 50 days of playtime in 2019 and 2020. The average player doesn't play that much, so that burnout of the same matchmaking system I felt years ago, not to sound hipster about it, but I feel like for casual players after years, maybe now that that's finally catching up, where they're hitting their 50-day marker across all those titles of the last 5 years. It's probably that same burnout that players are feeling. So maybe that's it, maybe not, but I mean, how do you fix this? Firstly, I think the easiest way to go about this is just to loosen the restrictions we see. That seems to be the easiest in theory and in practice, and all people really want, or like at the very least, transparency is key. Matchmaking data and public stats like that are so important, I think, to the just gesture of good faith. Putting those in as a public marker for you to see in your game itself would be huge. And I mean, this is the same thing going back years now to things like showcasing player counts in past games. Like the classic COD games, you could see how many players were online. It seems so easy to quell any sort of issues that players have just by simply informing them, to then prevent any sort of invented narrative instead. Information's everything and can easily remedy situations if you'll let it. Beyond that, like if you're not going to do that, make matchmaking in public matches actually worthwhile. I don't know that I like the XP value thing being tied to that like suggested, but we also saw things like Invasion in Modern Warfare 2, where there were XP values tied to literal bots versus actual players. So it's not necessarily the worst idea, but doing something, anything, I feel like could be better than just trying to hold out as long as you can, holding this hidden matchmaking system and hidden matchmaking rating from all the players here. So that's where we're at here. That was the information and discussion we got from someone who wrote the system at hand. So what do you think? Drop your thoughts down below. Drop a like if you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts. And of course, make sure to subscribe for more Black Ops 6 and other FPS content. But for now, that's where we're gonna wrap it up. So thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you later. Take care and peace.